In a world where everyone wants to appear strong, few have the discipline to be strong. Today, we're diving deep into a brutally honest truth, the kind of truth Machiavelli himself would deliver if he were alive in our time, scrolling through social media, watching how men expose their weakness without even realizing it. This isn't about history, kings, or empires. This is about you, your family, your work, and your daily choices. Because in this modern battlefield of opinions and appearances, strength is no longer measured by how loud you speak, but by how unshakable you remain when the world tests you. If you've ever wondered why some men command respect without trying, while others lose it without even noticing, this video will show you exactly why. These are 3 behaviors that instantly expose weak men, and how Machiavelli would identify, dissect, and destroy those weaknesses in today's world. So before we begin, hit subscribe, drop a like, and share this with someone who needs to stop pretending and start leading. If Machiavelli were dropped into 2025 and handed a smartphone instead of a quill, his first move would be to stop the speeches and start watching behavior. In modern parenting, that means he would sit quietly through birthday party tantrums, scroll through the family group chat, and note who capitulates at the first outburst and who enforces the rule with calm force. A weak man in this context is easy to spot. He negotiates bedtimes with a 7-year-old because he fears the label of strict dad online. He lets Instagram applause substitute for meaningful authority, and he apologizes to children for enforcing boundaries as if firmness were a moral failing. Machiavelli would treat that man as a strategic liability, not publicly shaming him, but removing his influence over key household decisions, quietly taking over arrangements that require authority, discipline schedules, schooling choices, and demonstrating that consequences will follow promises. The lesson is surgical and immediate. In parenting, weakness is revealed by performative softness and avoidance of durable consequences, and the Machiavellian fix is to make discipline predictable, visible, and unemotional so the household learns that promises and punishments mean what they say. When a father repeatedly says we'll talk about it later in the middle of a meltdown and then never follows through, the pattern is not confusion, it's weakness by inconsistency. In a modern family, that inconsistency looks like carrying over canceled privileges from a week ago, sending mixed messages in front of other relatives on Zoom, or posting a stern caption on social media but privately undoing the punishment because of guilt. Machiavelli would call this undermining one's own law. Laws that are not enforced are no laws at all. He would advise a ruthless calibration: write the rule, announce the consequence, and apply it without drama the first time the rule is broken. To the modern parent, that looks like a written behavior contract, a visible calendar of consequences shared with the child and the other parent, and a repeated, calm enactment that trains the child to expect outcomes rather than bargains. That kind of discipline produces efficiency and respect where emotive appeals do not. Avoidance of conflict is not noble in family life, it is corrosive. You watch it show up in the man who refuses to confront a partner about finances, who gives in to in-law pressure to keep peace, and who surrenders to passive-aggressive scripts rather than naming the grievance. In present-day family arguments, this weakness reveals itself in late-night texts apologizing for things he didn't do, or in the man who agrees publicly to appease relatives but then sulks in private. Machiavelli's method would be clinical: assess what is worth contesting, choose the battleground that maximizes your interests, and fight there. That could mean pulling the partner aside after the argument, presenting a single, rational demand with consequences, and following through, or it might mean making a small public correction to reassert a boundary. He would teach the modern man to value decisive confrontation over indefinite capitulation because the former secures status while the latter surrenders it. If you want to see weakness in parenting quicker than anything, watch who lets the child control narratives about them. The man who allows a 4-minute Instagram story to dictate his discipline, deleting his own comment to avoid humiliation, changing household rules because of online backlash, or letting followers' opinions replace trusted advice, is exposed. Machiavelli would weaponize narrative control. He would curate the family image only insofar as it supports authority. But he would never allow public opinion to erode domestic rule. Practically, that means enforcing internal discipline even when friends disagree on Facebook, keeping family disputes offline, and using selective disclosures, celebrate achievements publicly, handle failures privately, so the family's public persona is one of competence rather than vulnerability. In the arena of family arguments beyond parenting, sibling rivalries, in-law disputes, division of care duties, weakness is exposed by the man who always yields to social pressure rather than structuring alliances. The contemporary scene is full of group chats, shared expense apps, and collective calendars. A weak man is the one who ignores scheduling conflicts, who fails to call meetings, and who is repeatedly brushed aside when decisions must be made. Machiavelli would treat these dynamics like a small court. He would quietly secure allies, a cousin, a sensible sibling, isolate the troublemaker by limiting their influence, and set traps where cooperation is rewarded and obstruction is penalized. He wins not by loud dominance but by engineering the network so votes fall his way, practical, private maneuvers that reconfigure family politics without melodrama. Public virtue signaling during a family fight is another modern tell. The man who posts passive-aggressive memes about empathy, tags his partner in sanctimonious comments, or runs to social media for validation instead of solving problems in the kitchen reveals himself as someone who prefers external applause to internal competence. Machiavelli would disdain this. Public displays are tools, not catharsis. He would advise withholding public statements until you have consolidated your position, and using the platform to display unity once the problem is solved. In practice that means no airing of dirty laundry on social feeds, no recruiting of online sympathizers, and a surgical use of public posts only to reinforce a victory or normalize a required change. Indecision in a crisis, when urgent healthcare, elder care, or sudden household financial stress demands a leader, shows weakness faster than any lecture. Modern examples: staring at a pending hospital decision while relatives argue on a group video call, stalling on selecting a care facility because the man fears being judged, or asking for endless advice from acquaintances instead of deciding. Machiavelli would step in and take the blame. He'd choose quickly, act visibly, and accept temporary blame to secure long-term authority. The tactical translation is straightforward: create a decision timeline, announce it to the family, and execute. People will forgive a decisive choice more readily than they will respect endless debate. When it comes to children's educational progress, weakness shows up as overprotection and rescue. A modern parent who completes assignments for their child, calls teachers at the first sign of a bad grade, or negotiates deadlines on behalf of an adolescent has not earned involvement. They have created dependency. Machiavelli would have no patience for that kind of manufactured comfort. He would treat schooling as a lab for character formation. The Machiavellian approach: set explicit responsibilities, grades, deadlines, impose visible consequences, restricted screen time, extra chores, and let the child face setbacks in a controlled environment where recovery is possible but not spoiled. Practically, a study contract co-signed by parent and child, scheduled teacher check-ins, and clear, enforceable academic penalties. Flattery and empty praise for performance is another contemporary educational weakness. In an era where participation trophies and inflated parent-teacher chats are common, the man who champions everybody's a winner undermines learning. Machiavelli would insist on meritocracy, praise that is tied to measurable improvement, rewards that are contingent on performance, and public recognition that incentivizes real effort. This looks modernly like progress dashboards, explicit milestones for scholarships or competitions, and honest feedback during parent-teacher conferences that is framed as opportunity rather than attack. avoiding teacher feedback is a soft weakness that cripples a child's development. The man who rejects a teacher's critique as biased, who mobilizes the PTA to intimidate educators, or who shelters his child from remedial work out of pride exposes himself as someone who values image over results. Machiavelli would do the opposite. He'd forge alliances with competent teachers, leverage their authority to enforce standards, and be willing to be unpopular with other parents if it benefits the child's competence. In real terms, that is attending conferences, demanding measurable improvement plans, and setting non-negotiable routines that align with educator recommendations, even if it draws criticism from other parents. Machiavelli would view schools as battlefields where reputations are formed early. He'd create controlled adversity to expose and harden character. In the modern context, this translates into orchestrated challenges, competitive teams, selective classes, or accountability partnerships with peers. A man who refuses to put his child into situations where they might fail, summer programs, tournaments, or competitive schooling, is revealing a fear of being judged. The Machiavellian remedy is exposure with support, sponsored risks that test resilience and teach recovery, accompanied by structured debriefing so lessons become assets rather than scars. In the workplace, the weak man is the one who fears being disliked more than he fears being ineffective. He softens his viewpoint in meetings, approves ill-advised projects to stay popular on Slack, and avoids uncomfortable feedback. Modern signals include overuse of reaction emojis, agreeing to every Zoom ask, and staying silent during performance reviews for fear of rocking the boat. Machiavelli would not counsel cruelty, he would counsel clarity. He would coach the man to establish competence through consistent output, to speak truth to power with prepared data, and to select the moments to be outspoken, not constantly, but strategically. That creates a reputation of reliability rather than a persona of timidity. Blame shifting is a common workplace weakness, mansplaining himself out of accountability, naming external factors as scapegoats, or operating a blame economy where loyalty is transactional. The modern example is the employee who blames the client for missed deadlines or the manager who points to team issues without owning their lack of planning. Machiavelli would teach a counterintuitive tactic, sometimes take the fall publicly to preserve long-term credibility and then quietly reassign responsibility where needed. This moves you from short-term humiliation to long-term authority, because people prefer leaders who stabilize chaos rather than those who worsen it. A weak attitude at work also shows through performative optimism and avoidance of hard choices, the manager who keeps low performers because terminating them is too harsh. Or the employee who stays stuck on a sunk project to avoid admitting a mistake. Machiavelli would treat this as managerial malpractice. He'd encourage ruthless triage, cut what fails quickly, redeploy resources into what produces visible gains, and make the rationale transparent. In the modern office, that looks like monthly metrics reviews with clear thresholds, termination policies that are fairly and consistently applied, and visible reallocations that demonstrate outcome-focused leadership. Popularity over performance is an insidious weakness, spending more time curating social rapport and less time shipping results. The modern weak man organizes weekly social hours and becomes the office's nice guy while his workload slips and opportunities pass him by. Machiavelli would turn popularity into a tool rather than a goal, cultivate influential allies who can amplify your wins, reward loyalty selectively, and then be willing to withdraw favors when performance slips. The tactical translation is mentorship paired with accountability. Sponsor a protege publicly but ensure performance metrics are enforced privately. In business transactions, the weak entrepreneur is the one who accepts the first offer because he craves closure. The person who signs terms over Zoom without a counsel review, or the founder who reveals critical unit economics in a first pitch. These are modern symptoms: emails tagged accept within hours, contract negotiation via text message, and a lack of walkaway thresholds. Machiavelli's playbook is simple and harsh. Never accept the first offer, create alternatives, and cultivate the ability to walk away. Practically, that means preparing BATNAs, best alternatives, delaying signature until you have leverage, and using silence as a negotiating weapon. Oversharing your desires in a deal is a mark of weakness. The founder who admits how desperate they are for funding, the sales guy who reveals margin limits on day one, or the business owner who hosts an investor in their office without a clear agenda has exposed bargaining chips. Machiavelli would advise controlled disclosure, reveal only what strengthens your position and use ambiguity to create leverage. In modern terms, this becomes staged information releases, multiple concurrent negotiations to create FOMO, and employing scarcity, limited shares, limited allocation, to push better terms, blind trust in counterparties, handshake deals without due diligence or MOUs without staged performance measures, is a glaring modern weakness. It appears in founders who accept a partner on faith, in small businesses who ship product without escrow, and in managers who grant access without vetting. Machiavelli would insist on reconnaissance and staged commitments. Start with a pilot, test compliance, then scale. Translate this into contracts with milestones, escrowed payments, NDAs that are enforced, and public precedent-setting enforcement when someone breaks terms, not to be vicious, but to make the market respect the rules you set. In deals, a weak man scrambles and apologizes, a Machiavellian man restructures and signals resolve. In the modern market, that could mean publicly renegotiating terms, quietly securing new partners, or enforcing termination clauses to maintain one's reputation. The point is to treat enforcement as a strategic investment. The moment you allow breaches to slide, you signal that contracts are optional and your future bargaining power collapses. Machiavelli would act fast and visibly to restore credibility. The through line across parenting, family disputes, education, workplace, and business deals is the same. Weakness shows through a preference for immediate comfort over long-term position. The modern Machiavellian prescription is to replace moralizing with metrics, performativity with enforceable routines, and hesitation with calibrated action. That means written agreements at home and at work, measurable goals for children and employees, staged concessions in negotiation, and a personal rulebook that you apply consistently. He would not counsel cruelty for cruelty's sake. He would counsel the disciplined removal of ambiguity and the ruthless defense of reputation. Finally, if you want one blunt takeaway in the tone Machiavelli would use today, people respect results more than apologies, and they fear the man who rewards competence and punishes failure predictably. In a world saturated with noise, reels, email threads, remote meetings, and group chats, the weak man is the one who reacts to the noise. The strong man, as Machiavelli would teach, engineers outcomes. He communicates when necessary, enforces when necessary, and cultivates allies when necessary. Implement that in parenting by keeping discipline public and consistent, in family dynamics by building quiet alliances, in education by enforcing measurables and exposing children to controlled failure. In work by owning outcomes and curating reputation, and in business by entering negotiations with alternatives and walking away when terms fail to safeguard your future. If Machiavelli were alive today, he wouldn't waste time convincing anyone to be strong. He'd simply watch who acts with discipline and who breaks under pressure. Weakness isn't hidden anymore, it's broadcast daily in the way men parent, argue, study, work, and negotiate. But strength, real strength, is quiet, measured, and deliberate. It's the man who leads his home with calm order, confronts conflict without apology, speaks truth at work without flattery, and walks away from bad deals without fear. That's what Machiavelli would admire today, not the loudest man in the room, but the one who plays the long game. So if you found truth in this message, if it challenged you or forced you to look at your own habits, subscribe to the channel. Like this video to push it further into the algorithm, and share it with someone who needs to wake up from weakness and start moving with purpose. Because in the modern world, strength isn't inherited, it's engineered.